but something that most of you showed up today to hear. So I'm going to turn over Karen Wetzel, who is the manager of the NICE framework, to talk about the updated NICE framework. Karen, all yours.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm thrilled to be able to share with you about the framework and that we have just released the revision. So I am going to do a quick screen share, just to go through a quick couple of slides. I know I only have a couple of minutes here, but let me go ahead and get that set. And it should be sharing now. Let me see. Can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Great. Again, I know I only have a couple of minutes here, but thank you so much for having me here. I'm really thrilled to introduce that we have now, as of today, published the NIST special publication 800-181, our first revision of the Workforce Framework for Cybersecurity, or the NICE framework. Having just joined NICE in October, it's really exciting for me to be able to share a little bit about what's in the revision, as well as to talk to you about what our future plans are. Starting with the idea that really that this publication is looking at cyber work broadly. And that means not only those people who are doing cybersecurity as their primary job position, but also those who need specific cybersecurity related roles, skills, knowledge in order to minimize cybersecurity risks to the enterprise. And so I really enjoyed the last panel there, particularly when there's discussions about how does this work across all of the people who are participants in cybersecurity. So, it is for employers who are looking to assess their workforce needs. It is for learners, and that includes students who are wanting to know more about it, as well as job seekers and employees who are looking to chart their own future. And it is for education and training and credential providers to make those connections with the employer needs and with the students to make that bridge, as was sort of discussed in that panel. And it's really comprised of some main building blocks, and those are, for those of you who are familiar to the framework, going to know about our tasks, our knowledge, and our skills. In this revision, the skills and knowledge and abilities has been refined and streamlined, so that now the abilities have been brought into skills. It was a bit redundant before. And so the knowledge and skill statements that are here are describing the learner, whereas the task, which is comprised of those knowledge and skills, describes the work to be done. And this is where really there's a nice connection to the employer, as well as people trying to figure out what they need to build, because it is oftentimes going to be employer-led about what some of those needs are. And so going into the applications and uses, you could see that, it can be done through work roles. It could be done through teams, but it's also can be applied and used through what we have now as competencies. It was in an early version. It's been reintroduced here. And competencies are the things that are describing it from a learner perspective. So it's really a mechanism for organizations to assess learners, and it's an exciting opportunity to increase alignment between the employers, between learners, and the education and training providers. And to talk more about that, I hope that you will all be able to join us 1 month from today, when we'll have a webinar on this topic. It's competencies, the next frontier, and you could see for closing the cybersecurity skills gap, the registration is live and on our site now. I have a long link here, but you can also just go to nist.gov/NICE and get to that registration there. So altogether, what we've aimed to do with this revision is make sure that the attributes of the framework are going to be focused on our agility, on flexibility, on interoperability, and on modularity. And one way we've done that is by taking those competencies, work roles, and the TKS statements, which had previously been appendices in the framework, and we've taken those and removed it from the publication itself. And so by shifting these artifacts to live outside of the publication, we're really enabling them to be more fluid and responsive. We could be have a much more defined update process for these core components, and they can help us to actually make sure that these attributes are ensured. I do want to also point out that in December, we are excited to launch our users group. And this is one way for you to be able to find out about these updates as they occur, but also for you to share back with the community about how you're using the framework, and to be a resource for each other. I'm going to talk a little bit more about future plans in a moment. And you can see, though, if I want to revisit the original timeline, many of you will have been familiar with this timeline. It was introduced about a year ago now, and this was the original timeline for updating the framework. But now that we've reached the end, we're going to start back at the beginning, and now we have an updated timeline. And so with this one, I mentioned the launch of the users group and our webinar in December. And we're also, at the same time, a lot of this is going to be taking place. Some of the work has already begun on a lot of this, but in January, you'll see that we'll have a request for comments on NICE framework competencies. During the webinar next month, we hope to introduce a draft version of those, and then we'll have that formal request for comments in January. At the same time, I'll be working on defining a change process that will be community informed. It's going to be one that's meant to be open, but also that will provide some structure so that we can not only make some changes to these artifacts, but in a way that is going to be very clear and that is not going to have any kind of negative impact on those systems that are currently using the previous framework version. So we will have a request for comments on that process in the beginning of next year. And at the same time, you'll see that the TKS statements and work rules are going to be reviewed. We've started to look at that, and we aim to have some of that review by early 2021, March-ish timeframe, to have some of that for comment out there. And then going in, also starting around that time, we hope to launch what's, I think, a really exciting new opportunity, is some community workshops. Hoping to have those be a quarterly workshop as a way to engage with all of you and find out how we can make the framework as useful as possible for you. And then, of course, we're going to finish out the year by having completed our review and made any necessary updates to all the framework components and making sure those are all available. So quick recap, because I know a lot of that was fast. We have a great new revised framework publication now available in the library. It was streamlined content. We are working with the framework data. So those former appendices, they're currently still available in the NICE Framework Center. They will be available for you to continue to use until they are updated, but they are still there at this point. And of course, if you go to the Resource Center, you'll see that there are all sorts of other tools and resources there for you to help you with making sure that the framework is as useful for you as possible. And I think my 5 minutes is about up, so I'm going to leave it there and say thank you to all of you. I really look forward to engaging with this community more, getting to know all of you. I hope that you feel free to reach out to me. There are a couple of emails there, and there's a link to our resource center as well. Thanks, Randy.